In this video, we're going to analyze the shape of a fish's tail and how that correlates to their behavior, especially when it comes to feeding. Now, we did another video on a fish's mouth structure and how that affects their feeding behavior, so if you haven't done so already, definitely be sure to check out that video as well. Now, we're going to keep this at a pretty general high level. You know, there are various shapes of fish's tails, but you really have two main shapes. You have a broad fan tail, and then you have more of a narrow forked tail. So we're going to talk about each and how that pertains to the fish's behavior. So first we have fish that have broad fan-like tails. These species include redfish, snook, sea trout, flounder, and black drum, just to name a few. But what all these fish really have in common is that they typically dwell along the bottom in inshore waters, so they don't really travel very far, and oftentimes they're sitting in place. And when they're sitting in place, what they need is basically a tool that they can use to get a quick burst of speed for a short amount of time, and that's where that broad tail really comes into play because it displaces a lot of water very quickly. So if you think about the way these species behave when they swim, those inshore species, you know, like I said, redfish, snook, sea trout, flounder, black drum, they need that sudden quick burst of speed. They're not really made for swimming very long distances very quickly, because they're going to have a lot of drag with this type of tail, and it's just not efficient for covering a lot of distance. And if you also notice the base of their tail, something else to look at, the base of their tail is very thick, you know, very strong muscles for that very quick sudden burst of energy and for that large tail to move a lot of water very quickly. So now you may be asking yourself, okay, so how does this pertain to me as a fisherman trying to catch these fish? Now, what this comes down to is casting. Casting is very important when you're targeting these fish using lures, or even if you're sight casting to them with dead bait or live bait. These fish don't want to travel very far to go after their food. They're built for sudden bursts of speed where something comes by close to them and they can attack it very quickly and be on their way. So that's why casting accuracy is very important when it comes to fishing inshore for these species that have those broader fan-like tails. And then a fun quick fact about the spot on a redfish's tail. This spot is actually meant to imitate an eye. Predators pay very close attention to the eyes of their prey because that pretty much lets them know whether or not they have been or can be seen by their prey. So this allows them to sneak up and ambush their food. With that spot on the tail end of the fish, this can fool any larger predator basically from sneaking up behind them, thinking that the fish is facing their direction because of that spot on their tail imitating an eye. Now lastly, we take a look at fork-tailed fish, such as tarpon, tuna, mahi, and pompano, just to name a few. And as you notice, their tails are very narrow and streamlined, and also their bodies are also very narrow and streamlined. And this gives the fish the ability to basically travel at much faster speeds for much longer distances. So these fish are built more for endurance and speed, as their bodies and tails have less drag on them. And the majority of these species you're going to find offshore, you know, very large bodies of water where they do have to travel large distances. And because you have larger body of water, if they're chasing food, they may have to chase their food for a long distance. So they need this body type and tail in order to go after their prey. So how this pertains to actually fishing for these species, you will notice most of these species, you know, tarpon, tuna, and mahi especially, can be caught trolling offshore or near shore because those fish are willing to chase down their food. You know, they have the ability to based on their tail and their body. So hopefully this video has given you a little bit of a better understanding of why fish's tails are shaped a certain way. Again, it really comes down to their habitat, how they feed, and how they move through the water most efficiently. And as always, if you know how your target behaves and why, you have a much better advantage over them. However, there are definitely more pieces to the puzzle of catching fish. And if you happen to be struggling to catch more fish, I would highly recommend checking out our club membership at saltstrong.com, where we guarantee you'll start catching more fish. So that will wrap up this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below.